Hi, I'm Maggie.
And I'm Marin, and you're listening to Tell Me I'm Sorry, a podcast where we deconstruct and muse on depictions of girlhood in film, literature, and other media.
A feminist celebration of pop culture, the audacity of youth, and the ways we grow away from and into our bodies, beliefs, and dreams for ourselves and each other.
And today we are discussing
The Starling Girl.
Directed by Laurel Parmet. This is her feature film debut, but she's previously directed a number of short films. It was released May 12th, 2023. And as for poster tagline, we don't have one this week. It will be interesting to chart perhaps the correlation between not necessarily the quality of the film, but the type of movie it is and whether or not there's a poster tagline.
Right.
Because this film is very small, like indie movie.
Mm-hmm.
And its content doesn't feel ripe for a tagline. The same way The Lost Daughter didn't.
Right. Yeah. I think that the Lost Daughters literary foundation maybe made it slightly more given to having a tagline. And taglines are interesting, I think, too, because it's technically another medium. It's writing, right? It's words meant to describe images.
Right.
Or a more imagistic based art form. Anyway.
Much to consider.
Yeah.
On this Tuesday evening. Maggie, if I Googled this movie, what would Google tell me that this movie is about?
Google would say, 17-year-old Jem Starling struggles with her place within her Christian fundamentalist community, but everything changes when her magnetic youth pastor, Owen, returns to their church. I think that's okay. I think that's an all right synopsis. I wonder if the person who wrote that fretted over the adjective they used to describe the youth pastor. I think magnetic is an interesting choice. Mm-hmm. It opens the question, magnetic to who? And many of us who have either left or have had negative experiences with Christianity and its fundamentalism in any form would already know to be very cautious of a quote unquote magnetic youth pastor.
Yes.
Especially if you're a young girl.
Yes. And because I'm about to give my little summary, and I too fretted over the language of how to describe what is happening in this movie. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious what you think. And if you want to dispute something that I'm about to say, I will take no offense to that because I tried to be intentional and thoughtful, but who knows? So for those of you who have not seen The Starling Girl yet, though I think you should watch it, it's really good. Here's a brief summary of what happens in the movie. Jem Starling, who is played by Eliza Scanlon, is 17. She lives in rural Kentucky, and she is the oldest child in her Christian fundamentalist family. So she has a lot of responsibilities when it comes to helping care for her younger siblings and being a member of their church community. She is part of the church's dance troupe. They're like liturgical dancers who perform at services. And the appropriateness of this dancing is sometimes questioned by other people, specifically Jem's mom, who asks her questions like, are you doing it for God or for vanity? A boy named Ben who's a member of their church, asks Jem's parents if he can start courting her, which is a precursor to marriage, and her parents agree, though her dad seems less sure of the idea than her mom is. Jem is very close with her dad. They share a love of music and performing, And Jem knows that her dad is a recovering alcoholic who used to be a secular musician and later converted to Christianity. Jem is also not very excited about the idea of courting Ben. She feels, I think, very ashamed of her emerging sexuality, and you get the sense that she is generally unsure about who she is and unsure how to figure out who she is. Meanwhile, Owen, who is played by Lewis Pullman, the 28-year-old married youth group leader, returns from a mission trip. He's also the older brother of Ben, the boy who has started courting Jem. And Jem develops a crush on him, I would call it. He has their youth group do very unorthodox exercises. He seems less rigid than the other men at the church, so it makes sense why Jem, who is maybe feeling restless herself, is drawn to him. They start spending more time together. Eventually, Owen kisses her, and then he initiates a sexual relationship with her. And the movie is very clear in showing the power imbalances that indicate this is not a healthy or appropriate relationship. But the movie is also very resolute, I would say, in Jem's point of view. So we can also feel that at the same time, she has fallen in love with this man. And while all this is happening, Jem's father, he is struggling through a depressive episode. He recently learned that one of his old friends has died. He overdoses on pills and falls into a coma. And while that's happening, Jem's mom discovers her relationship with Owen, is furious, blames Jem, tells Jem that she's ruined, and says that she needs to be sent to some kind of like troubled teen camp. But before Jem can be sent away, Owen shows up. He tells Jem he loves her, and then he's going to leave his wife to be with her. They run away together, but when they're staying at a motel preparing for their next move, Jem realizes that a life with Owen might not be what she wants. So she sneaks out, takes his car, drives to Memphis, and seeks out a bar her dad said he used to play music at. And the film ends there with Jem alone at this bar, dancing to music.
That's a great synopsis, I think. I like that you made mention of the fact that Jem does, in fact, have feelings for Owen. Mm-hmm. I mean, she does. She has a crush on him. Mm-hmm. And as, like, when you're a kid, you're allowed to have crushes. You should be able to have crushes on like adults in your life. Like, you're figuring out those feelings.
I would say, to have a crush on an adult when you're a kid.
Yeah.
And it's up to the adult.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's their fucking responsibility to be like, I'm actually not attracted to children, which you think would be a low bar, but it's too high a bar for our dear Owen and a lot of men.
Yes. Oh, origin story. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first? Are you more interested in hearing my reaction?
I think so,
before you go? Okay. So, my origin story for this movie, in our previous episode, when Maggie announced that this was the movie we were going to be watching, I wasn't sure what movie she was talking about, and I said, I don't think I've ever heard of this movie. And I was kind of a lie, because immediately after we stopped recording, I looked the movie up on my phone, realized I did know what this movie was because I remember reading about it when it was making the rounds at, I believe it was Sundance, where it first premiered. And I got really excited, and the exact words out of my mouth were, Eliza Scanlon is the future.
Yes, true.
Because I, like a lot of Americans, she's Australian, so she has worked in like Australian film and TV for a while. But like a lot of Americans, I was first introduced to her when she was in Sharp Objects. She is my favorite part of the Greta Gerwig adaptation of Little Women. I've seen Baby Teeth, which is a great movie. Now I've seen this, which I think is also a great movie. Basically, Eliza Scanlon, I wish she could keep playing teenage girls for the rest of her life. Unfortunately, she can't, but she's really, really good at it. So I was really excited to watch this movie after I realized, oh, I do know what this movie is. It's the movie about Christian fundamentalism with Eliza Scanlon in it. And I was also excited because I really like movies about religion or just like art about religion in general, whether it's, you know, a spiritual memoir or novels or whatever. Obviously, these types of art exist on a spectrum. When I say I like movies about religion, I don't mean I like the God's Not Dead type movies where religion is cartoonishly easy and this catch-all solution for everyone's problems and you just need to pray more and your life will be magically better. That's not what I mean, but having been raised in a religious household, I like movies which wrestle with doubt and the allure of the transcendent and the failures of humanity through the lens of religion. So I don't like movies that exist to propagandize religion, but I also don't like movies that exist purely to like shit on organized religion. Maybe that's controversial to say, but I think it's a really rich space to explore people's humanity. I'm saying all this to say that I think this movie is a very nuanced and complex portrait of the community it depicts, which is this Christian fundamentalist community in rural Kentucky. And I think that pursuit is all the more admirable when you learn that Laurel Parmet did not grow up in this type of community. She is coming at it from an outsider's perspective. And I think it's very evident that she has a lot of compassion for people who grew up in these communities, for these communities, and she is thinking deeply about the good they provide people and the way they also hurt people. The other thing I wanted to say is that, because I had this thought and then I had to think about why I was having this thought, where watching this movie, I could kind of predict every single thing that was about to happen next. And often when we're talking about predictability in a narrative, we tend to skewer that as a negative, but sometimes it's just narrative beats work because they work. And so why try to fix what's not broken? But then I was also thinking, what does it say about our culture that a narrative about a girl being exploited can be seen as predictable or familiar? So I think that criticism is moot, is all I'm saying.
Okay, so first I want to respond. I love the phrase, the allure of transcendence, because part of what drew me to this movie is I was raised in Catholicism. I never could believe in God. I also never could quite believe in Santa Claus. I don't even mean to say that to diminish other people's whatever they want to believe in, you know, as long as it doesn't impede on my bodily autonomy and freedom to exist in the ways that bring me joy and comfort. And I'm not even a particularly logical person either. I'm not practical. I believe in some level of magic, but I think that you can access that magic through art, through creation, through movement, through connection with other people. And there's certainly magic in the world. We don't have to fucking name it all the time. If you put something in front of me and you say, this is Santa Claus and he is magic and this is a god and he is magic, I'm not going to buy it. And I didn't as a kid, but I tried really hard because what did it mean to not believe in God? What then? You just die? What a terrible thought. How scary. But I finally had to admit it out loud to myself when I was 24. I just couldn't pretend anymore. And it was one of the hardest things, because once I said it out loud, I was like, I have to really contend with this now. There is no God. And it just shattered my life, right? It eroded the foundation of my entire childhood. But then once I got through it, after a lot of crying and fear and panic attacks, really, my life personally became better for it because it allowed me to, leaving that religion also allowed me to leave a very dangerous relationship And those are the things I was thinking, I guess, when I was watching this movie. I mean, I don't really have an origin story. I found it on Canopy, on that website. And I was like, this seems like it's going to be really good. And then I watched it and I thought, I want to talk about this movie with Marin. Whether or not we had this podcast, I was like, I need to talk about this movie with Marin. But the allure of transcendence, I still see the allure. And if I had the kind of brain that allowed me to believe in a God, I would take it. I would take it. But that isn't in the stars, as they say. I believe in astrology. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I fuck around with it a little bit, you know. I fuck around with some dumb shit.
You're into... I'm not saying tarot is dumb, but you're into tarot, right?
Yeah, and I don't mean dumb in a bad way. I mean dumb as in, this is some stuff I like to do. I don't know. I use the word in a strange way, but yeah, I do. I use tarot and I do use some astrology, and I think that those are just different ways to access selves and whatever is mystical about existing. Nobody fucking knows what any of this means.
I can't articulate my thoughts about God right now. I'm just like not.
That's a big ask. No one's asking you to do that.
So I can't. But I think in terms of part of why I find religious communities to be such a rich space to explore in art, I think a lot of my intellectual curiosity and my belief in the importance of intellectual rigor, I can trace that back to my Catholic upbringing and the theologians and philosophers I have studied and read, and reading about these mystics who were grappling with these really big ideas about our existence that are questions that I think anyone has, regardless of their religious affiliation.
I think for myself, as I've moved away from the organization of spiritual practice, is this idea of ritualistic worship practices, though, and I still have those. Religion itself is just steeped in ritual, and so I've carried that on because it's just a part of how I know to move through the world.
Religion, it's complicated.
Really, yeah, really is. Okay, well, I guess it's over. Just kidding. Where do we?
I don't know.
Do you want to start with the first scene?
Sure. Yeah.
I think the opening scene is Jem and her dance troupe dancing in the church, isn't it? Yeah. I feel like in this episode, perhaps every conversation we have has its roots in a kind of memoir vibe, right? Because we're obviously relating it to our own lives.
Right.
Maybe this one even more so, just because I saw so much of these little parts of myself. And I did not grow up with this level of fundamentalism by any means, but enough that I just connect. I understand what was happening. So we have this dance scene, and I brought that up because the first thing I thought as they were dancing, and I feel almost like uncomfortable, embarrassed to admit this, but it's because I was exposed to this kind of, I don't know what the word is, this expectation of modesty. Again, I cannot stress enough that I was not raised with this level of fundamentalism, but it doesn't take that much to be subjugated by it. And so I noticed in that scene, I was like, I can kind of see the outline of her bra. And why did I notice that? Because when we had first communion in my church in the 3rd grade is when you did it. And I wore a training bra. I was like a larger kid and always had bigger boobs throughout. At 12 years old, I got my period. And then by 13 years old, I've been the same exact size in every way since then. So yeah, in the 3rd grade, I was wearing a training bra, and it was my first communion. And it was a problem that you were going to be able to see my bra underneath my communion dress.
Because the dresses are white.
Yes.
You're a little girl dressed up as a miniature bride to receive the body of Christ for the first time. The metaphor is not subtle.
It's not. No, it's exactly that. You're dressed up as a little bride of Christ. The dresses that they're wearing in that scene are white. And these girls are much older. I mean, I was 9. And these girls are, how old is Jem?
17.
17. That's right. Yeah. So obviously they're wearing bras. Not that you have to wear a bra, but it's a sign of modesty that you wear a bra. So it would be a problem if she wasn't wearing one too.
Right.
Right after that scene, they do this dance, and another mother comes up to Jem and says, just to let you know, you can see your bra through that. It's okay. These things happen. And then obviously Jem is immediately deflated because she loves to dance. And she was riding this high of the performance that she just gave. And then to be suddenly made aware that her body can commit violence just by it existing. So that was the first scene. And I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, okay, 2 things about that scene struck me. One is that when that mom mentions to Jem, we can see the outline of your bra through your dress. Jem's mother immediately is like, oh my gosh. And you realize that she didn't notice. And she hands Jem, she's wearing a cardigan sweater. She hands Jem the sweater so Jem can cover herself up. She didn't even notice. So hearing you say that you did notice, because I didn't notice. So that in and of itself is curious, because I was thinking just about all the confusion that Jem experiences in this movie and the ways in which this environment that she's growing up in feels like a pressure cooker for just the regular confusions any teenage girl would be feeling. And I thought about this opening scene and how this interaction with this woman being like, I can see your bra through your shirt. It feels so indicative of how these women are forced to make themselves small around men. And it feels like a result of that is that they're cruelest to each other, because they're like so starved for autonomy that they create whatever semblance of it that they can by crushing other women. Because that woman was not just, oh, I want to help you be more mindful. No, she wants to make you feel small so she can feel better about herself, because she's not the one whose bra is visible through her dress. It wasn't her daughter whose bra was visible through her dress. So it's reminding Jem and her mother, look at the ways you have failed and I have succeeded. But it's wrapped up in this, I'm just trying to help you be more godly. So right away, I was immediately like... And then the fallout from that scene is that Jem is very upset. She goes outside because they're having a reception after their service. And she goes outside to escape the crowd of people, and she starts crying. And that is where she sees Owen. He's sitting on the steps, also hiding from the people, smoking a cigarette, which he's not supposed to be doing. And he sees her crying, and their first interaction is him asking her what's wrong. So immediately her relationship with him starts with her being in this incredibly vulnerable place. And she tells him, I wasn't being mindful. And that's all she says. She doesn't explain the other parts of it. But that also struck me in just, if we're talking about predatory behavior, immediately she is vulnerable. And he knows that.
And that is the first moment where the grooming already begins, because right away in that first conversation, he asks her to keep a secret for him about him.
Oh, yeah. Because he's like, don't tell anyone you saw me smoking.
Right. And that's how grooming starts, is you ask them to keep a benign secret, which is why you should teach your children that secrets are not for adults to make with them. Just FYI, if anyone's listening to this that has children, before I was a teacher, I worked in child protection, and I worked plenty of sexual abuse cases. And you should teach your children that adults are not allowed to decide when something is a secret. If adult tells your child a secret, you need to teach them to come tell you, and then you get to decide whether that's a safe secret or not.
And that was something that happens over and over in this movie. And I appreciate that the movie is depicting it Because if you have decided that this is the story you're going to tell, then I think you have a responsibility to depict what is happening with accuracy that makes it clear that it's not okay. Mm-hmm. Because later into the movie, when they are having this, Jem and Owen, when they're having this sexual relationship, and he is married and he is an adult and she is 17. So there's a lot of levels where it's like, no one can know about this. No one can know about this because I'm married, and also no one can know about this because I'm an adult and you're a child, and we're technically not supposed to be together because they don't understand it. And there are multiple times where Jem, or where someone almost finds out, and he always pins the blame on her. He always makes it that it's her responsibility that her parents don't find out, that no one else at church finds out. I feel like this is very obvious to anyone who has critical thinking skills, but it's interesting how we are shown who he is, what his MO is from the very beginning, from the very first scene where we see him. Mm-hmm. And that behavior does not change at all.
And the subtlety with which that is done is just remarkably true to life. I think, to go back to your mention of these predictable plot points, we know that he's a predator. We know exactly the world that Jem is living in, and we know that he's predatory. Mm-hmm. He's asked her to keep a secret. Her body's existence in the world is in some ways a secret, right? And her world is one of suffocation, a minefield.
The other thing I just kept going back to, and again, my word of the week is confusion, is how consistently we are shown Jem engaging in other adult behaviors. I don't even know how many young siblings she has, but there are a lot of them.
Yeah.
Her dad is very out of it in terms of he is just not present emotionally because of his own illness and everything that's going on. And so there are just scenes where it's just Jem coming into the house and her mom being like, your little sister threw up. I need to cook dinner. You need to go give her a bath. Or Jem doing all this grocery shopping with her mom. Or Jem being the one who's supposed to watch them when they play outside. She's 17. Her parents have informed her that this boy at their church has all but asked to marry her. And they have decided that he can. So she's already a pseudo mom. She's already expected to probably get married within a year. When you are treating her like an adult in all of these ways, how is she even supposed to know that she is a child being groomed? Mm-hmm. Because it seems like in her mind, the main issue isn't the age difference between her and Owen. It's the fact that Owen is already married to someone else and divorce is forbidden. So he can't marry her instead.
Right.
Because my guess is that if he wasn't already married and the church elders found out they were having this sexual relationship, they would just make them get married. Mm-hmm. And it wouldn't matter that she would be a child bride and he would be a full-ass adult.
No.
You can just see how the ways in which they're forcing adulthood onto this girl in these other ways would make it so she wouldn't even understand what is happening to her with regards to Owen and the inappropriate behavior.
Right. I feel like this is a similar conversation to Romeo and Juliet, though, too, where like society, like there were these expectations on Juliet that she be married,
right?
That she
exactly
act as an adult. But then when she didn't have the emotional restraint to act as an adult or to regulate her emotions, literally, which at 13 years old, like Juliet was, at 17 years old. Right? As an adult, it's hard enough to regulate my emotions.
So hard.
But regulate we must, because there is work to do in this world. And I don't mean that in the sense that we live in late stage capitalism. Of course, that is very true. But I mean in the sense that there's work to do in this world. We have to take care of each other. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just have to fucking get your shit together and do the work that is in front of you. Mm-hmm. Whether that be writing a fucking poem or making a podcast, right? Mm-hmm. But there is, I want to mention the intertextuality, some aspect of my intertextuality before we move too far away from it, because I forgot. It is National Poetry Month. April is National Poetry Month. We're recording this in April. I don't know when this is actually It's not going to come out in April.
No.
At all.
But just so you know.
Yeah, just so you know. So for next April, you'll be ready. I read Adrienne Rich's The Dream of a Common Language, and these are poems between 1974 and 1977. I assume because it says poems 1974 through 1977. The very first poem, and The Dream of a Common Language, I have always, honestly, I haven't read any real literary analysis about this poetry collection. My connection to it is actually through Cheryl Strayed's memoir, because The Dream of a Common Language is the book that she kept on the trail with her as she hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, or at least a section of it. That's what the memoir is about. And so she writes about that and how it like kept her company. And anyway, The Dream of a Common Language, I have always taken it to mean this dream that all women, we have these shared experiences, and therefore there's this common language amongst us that we're able to speak. And the first poem is called Power, and it's about Marie Curie. And one of the lines is, she must have known she suffered from radiation sickness, which she did. Her body bombarded for years by the element she had purified. It seems she denied to the end the source of the cataracts on her eyes. And then she goes to describe some other symptoms of radiation sickness. And the last stanza, she died a famous woman denying her wounds came from the same source as her power. And so when I read that, what I thought about was that scene where the other mother comes to chastise Jem and her mother for Jem's bra showing. As women, we are wounded by the patriarchy, but especially for white women, we are given a certain sense of power over each other because of the patriarchy, and how that becomes cyclical. And you really see that working in this film right away from the very first few minutes.
The other scene where that feels particularly manifest is when Jem has to dance for Owen's wife. Jem has been put in charge of the dance troupe. She has promised that the dance moves that she's going to choreograph will be godly and worshipful. How do you even determine what that is when you're dancing? And so there is a scene where Owen's wife, I cannot remember her character's name.
I can't either.
But she comes to a dance practice to observe, to make sure that the moves are worshipful and godful. And at this point, Jem and Owen are, I keep wanting to call it an affair, but that feels not like the right word.
Right. I understand.
Like, what is the word to describe it?
It's really complicated.
I know.
And I don't know.
At this point, they are having sex. They have had sex. They are having sex on a regular basis.
She has to sneak out and be very careful.
She sneaks out and they see each other at night.
He gives her a cell phone.
Yeah, he gives her a burner phone so she can text him. So the point is that this woman is coming to observe Jem. Jem is in love with this woman's husband. I think it's safe to say that. Jem is having sex with this woman's husband. So Jem views this woman as some type of, I would say, and the wife watches the dance and she starts pointing out things that need to change. Because, for example, there's a part where everyone else is on the ground, but Jem is standing, and it's choreography. We know this is how group dances go, but the wife says that needs to change because it's singling Jem out to have her be the only person standing, and that's vain, and that goes against God. And it's very passive aggressive, I would say, in that it's delivered with a smile and with a, I'm just looking out for you and your soul, but you get the sense that this woman enjoys being able to exert power over Jem in this way. And it doesn't even have anything to do with the fact that Jem is having sex with this woman's husband, because this woman doesn't know that yet. And so it created this really complicated feeling in me where I understood why Jem was so mad. After this happens, Jem keys this woman's car, which I'm not saying you should do that, but there was a part of me that's like, I get it. I also get why you are so frustrated by this entire woman's existence, because you are viewing her as an impediment to what you think is your happiness. Because Jem thinks that Owen is going to marry her. I just assume that she thinks that. And what was my original point? Oh, so this woman also, she was probably forced to get married when she was 18 to some boy she didn't know, who said that he wanted to court her, and her dad was like, yeah, you have to court him. And she is just as stifled and deeply unhappy and probably doesn't know who she is. And so the only way she knows how to assert herself is by cutting down this teenage girl's dancing and telling her what about it isn't appropriate.
I don't even think she's cutting her down on purpose. Doesn't seem intentional to me. I mean, maybe. I don't think it's personal.
No, I don't think it is either. And I think that's a good distinction to make.
Had it been any of the girls that were centering themselves in the dance, right? I mean, at this point, the wife, she has no sense that Jem and Owen are together in any way.
But I don't know. There was something sad about seeing Jem lose this power. Mm-hmm. Because this is the one arena where she actually does maybe have power. Except actually she doesn't. Because she thinks in her relationship with Owen that she has some kind of power because she's experiencing sexual pleasure or whatever. So, you know, it's new and it's exciting. And I'm sure she thinks of it as some kind of liberation. But we know that it's not. Or we know that it's more complicated than that.
Right.
I should say. But the dancing, like, that was hers before Owen.
Right. Yes.
And we see it become less hers. And it's complicated by the fact that it becomes less hers at the hands of the woman who is married to the adult man she is currently in love with.
But also, yes, and going back to this idea of your wounds coming from the same source as your power, the reason that Jem is leading the dance is because the woman who was choreographing everything had a baby. So she had her baby, so she's on maternity leave. Mm-hmm. And Jem goes and asks Owen personally, can I lead?
Yes. Because they were just going to get rid of the dance troupe entirely because there wasn't this elder to lead it anymore.
Right. And Jem fought for it in this scene. She goes and talks to him at home, and he's outside gardening, and already in that moment, Owen is picking up on the fact that Jem is attracted to him. He knows in this moment, and he wants to give her this, right? And he gives her this opportunity because he knows this is a tit for tat situation. I'm going to give you this opportunity. You're already attracting me. You're going to be more attracting me. Then you're fuck me. You're going to want to sleep with me. Mm-hmm. It's all there. The body language is there. I just feel like I've lived these scenarios. I feel like as women, we've seen them happen to each other, to ourselves, and all of those things. You can see them happening in this moment. Mm-hmm. It is a predictable plot point because it is the truth of living.
I guess I do want to ask you what you think about Owen's characterization, because I read some interviews with the director and watched some, and she talked about how, yes, he engages in unacceptable behavior. He is preying upon this girl. Nothing that is happening is okay. And it's all his fault, you know? But she talked about, and I felt this too watching it, that she also at the same time wanted the audience to understand why Jem falls for him. And so I was curious if you felt that way.
Oh, yeah, totally. I was going to mention, he's like a conventionally attractive person. Mm-hmm. He's like cool youth pastor guy.
Yeah.
He is. Yeah. He smokes cigarettes. I still think cigarettes are attractive. Like I'll never grow out of that. I don't smoke anymore. He's kind of like bad boy youth pastor. He had these experience outside of her hometown. Like he came back from this mission trip. He knows about the world. Right. He has access to the world in ways that she doesn't. He is the allure of transcendence. Right?
Yeah.
I totally got why a 17-year-old would be like, I mean, 35-year-old me would be like, you're a fucking idiot, you know? But at 17, I would have been enamored.
Because the other thing that I felt, and I get the sense that Parmet was intentional about wanting maybe audiences to feel this way. I'll link some of the interviews that I read where she talks about this, but there's a part of me that pities him in the sense that just as much as these teenage girls are expected to be courted and get married and start popping out babies right away, that was expected of him too. Early in the movie, Jem's mom even makes a comment that it's weird that he's 28 and he doesn't have any kids yet. And I think the movie it's willing to go there in showing that men are also collateral damage in these highly repressive patriarchal communities. And also Owen's own lack of fulfillment, his own spiritual and emotional aimlessness. That is sad. But then also the movie, I think, understands how he takes a lot of that emotional, spiritual lack of fulfillment. He takes that out on his wife.
Right.
And he thinks Jem, this child who brings out this dangerous side of him or whatever, can fix that. And so there's, even as we're pitying him, maybe it's still all wrapped up in misogyny. So in that way, though, he feels like a very human character to me. Like he is, in a way, the villain of this movie, but that word, something about that word doesn't feel quite right to me. We are still being shown some semblance of his humanity at certain parts.
He's been made a villain. I think that the conversation around fundamentalism will often be like, oh, well, of course, in these repressed states or in these repressed communities, things like rape is going to happen. But it's not that these sort of communities just allow those things to happen. It's that they fuel them to happen. He is just as much of a victim as she is insofar as what choice did he have for his life, really? Right. I'm not saying he is as much as a victim as she is, period. I'm just saying in relation to autonomy with how to move through your life. I guess that's my fucking phrase, how to move through your life. Neither of them were given a lot of leeway.
The question I kept coming back to is, he's an adult, so because of that, we expect he should know better.
He does.
And he does. But also at the same time, what tools has he been given to navigate whatever precarious emotional state he is finding himself in?
Right. And it always just sucks to get to this part of the conversation about misogyny, because it is the part in which you have to say men are also victims of it. And it always hurts a little bit to say, because you feel like you're giving away some of the freedom to say, I've been a victim of this. I don't have a problem with using the word victim. I know that some people see it as a disempowering word, but I've always felt empowered by it to say, no, I have been wronged. I have been severely wronged in this situation. And then to have to say, and so have they. And to remember that it doesn't diminish your own experience. So yes, I think this film does a good job at illustrating how this sort of fundamentalism is dangerous for men as well. and creates these situations. It doesn't just allow them to happen. It's actually the harbinger. Is that how I want to say that word?
I think that's sort of, right?
Yeah.
Did you have another poem you wanted to share?
I do. This is a longer poem. It's a sequence. It's the part 2 in this book, and it's just called 21 Love Poems. And it's a beautiful sequencing of a relationship. Adrienne Rich was a lesbian woman. She was married to a man for a period of time, had children with him, left that relationship, and then the last 30 years of her life she spent with her partner, who I believe was also a writer, and I can't think of her name off the top of my head. So this is detailing that relationship she had, but also talking about just womanness and the concept of it. And this is taken from the 8th sequence. It's in Roman numerals, okay? My brain just doesn't work like that. Right. The woman who cherished her suffering is dead. I am her descendant. I love the scar tissue she handed on to me, but I want to go on from here with you fighting the temptation to make a career of pain. When I read that, and it correlates, of course, to this idea of how we pass our pain down. In this instance, how Jem's mother passes down her pain to Jem, passes down these expectations. Because when it is found out that Jem and Owen are together, one of the church elders comes to the home. And of course, Jem's mother ultimately blames her daughter. However, there is a moment where she looks at the elder and says, she didn't do this alone. She didn't act alone. This isn't all her fault. I think what she says is he had a lot to do with this as well. I should have pulled the exact quote, but that's the gist of it. And then a short time later, Jem sort of tries to come to terms with, I guess this is my life now. She goes to church and everyone in the church has to come up to her. She stands at the front in the altar and they're approaching her and basically giving her their forgiveness for her sins.
She issues a pre-written formal apology about how Satan has led her astray and she's going to do better and she is so sorry. And then one by one, people from the congregation are invited to come up and tell Jem they forgive her if they so wish.
But Owen does not need to be forgiven in this way. No. This isn't expected of him.
No.
In fact, he also, quote unquote, forgives her.
Yes. He comes up and I was truly in suspense where I was like, is he going to say, I'm sorry? Or is he going to say, I forgive you? Not that him saying I'm sorry would redeem him in any way, but it's like, will you acknowledge even the smallest ounce of your culpability?
Right.
And he doesn't. He says, I forgive you.
Yeah.
Because she's the one who ruined his life, who ruined his marriage, who has made his life a mess. But that doesn't extend to him.
So after that, Jem is sort of just existing. Owen shows up at their house and is like asking her to run away with him. And Jem's mother is there and she tells him to she doesn't say get the fuck out of here, but that is the sentiment.
She punches him.
She gets really aggressive. Yeah. And we see her for the first time really protecting her daughter. Because even as their dad was in the coma and before that, when he was having these issues with active addiction, Jem was still expected to take care of her dad. She was responsible for him as well as her siblings, as well as for just not having a conversation about it, for pretending as if it wasn't happening to make her mother's life easier.
Right.
And so Jem decides to leave with him. She packs her bags. She runs out to the car. And that, I think, was the most heart-wrenching scene in the film for me, is when her mother runs out and she's just screaming, wanting the car to stop Like, she just wants her daughter back. And there's a recognition in that moment of the damage that she's done, of this scar tissue that she's given her daughter, this expectation that her daughter makes a career of pain, a career of being a woman subjugated in this fundamentalist community. But we know as an audience, and Jem knows in that moment, that if she did get out of the car, her mother would expect her to go back to making a career of pain, even though for the brief moment, her mom is sort of, there's a recognition there of what she's done.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, that scene is a lot to watch, and it relates to my intertextuality, if I may.
Yes.
I read a novel called Holiday Country by Inci Atrek. It's a relatively recent novel. It was published, I believe, in 2024, maybe late 2023. And it is about a 19-year-old girl named Ada, who every summer, she and her mom spend the summer in Turkey, which is where Ada's mom is from. And they spend the summer in this small coastal town with Ada's grandmother. And then they spend the rest of the year living in the U.S. Ada's father is American, but he does not come on these summer trips to Turkey. So it's very much about her kind of straddling these two cultures, in that she speaks both Turkish and she speaks English. She considers herself Turkish and she also considers herself American. And these questions of, where do I want to end up in my adult life? Do I want to be like my mom and stay in the U.S., or do I want to return to Turkey and live the life my mother lived before she had me? And so the book starts with the start of summer. Ada's 19. She is in college. She meets this man who is much older than her and finds out that he and her mother used to be involved. And at first she thinks, oh, maybe I can get this man and my mom back together. Because in Ada's perspective, she's like, I think what my mom needs is to return living to Turkey all the time. I think my mom just misses Turkey. And I think this man could be like a key to that. Because Ada's parents they're having troubles in their marriage, and it's unsure if they're going to divorce or whatever. So Ada's interested in playing matchmaker. But then she finds herself very attracted to this man as well. And the novel is told from Ada's perspective, first person perspective. And so then it becomes this question of, what do I wish for my mom? What do I wish for me? What does my desire for this man who is much older than me, who my mom was once entangled with, what does that say about me? What am I supposed to do? So it's very complicated. The face Maggie's making right now is just like, oh God. Being involved with someone my mother was once involved with, absolutely wild to me.
I can't imagine.
I'm not passing judgment on this girl.
No, absolutely
But
not.
like, obviously this man is responsible for his own actions and should know better than to fuck a 19-year-old, which he does. But there is a conversation. There are two conversations I want to highlight. Ada is talking to a friend of her mother's about this man, and this woman tells Ada, the thing you have to realize about most men, Ada, is that they are ultimately unremarkable. The edge of them that excites, that seductive energy which you think is desire, it is not desire, and it's not about you. It's the thrill of a challenge, that rush of potentially getting away with something. Ada has this conversation. This is before she and this man are together, but they proceed to get together. And then as it goes in these stories, eventually someone finds out. And it's not her mom that finds out, but it's someone who is going to tell her mom. After this happens and they realize, okay, our secret is out, this, whatever it is over. Ada is looking at this man and she says this. He looks so miserable, so pathetic. Talking to himself on the couch, nearly in tears. The new heat rising from his body, wilting out the flowers. He doesn't look like someone who could help me build a new life in this country. There is nothing powerful or significant or striking about him. Even in the forgiving light of this Istanbul evening, he looks utterly unremarkable. So because this is a novel that must have thematic resonance, we're bringing back that idea of men being unremarkable. And the thought I'm about to express is very squiggly. So I'm going to try my best.
Those are my favorite kinds of thought.
Because this use of the word remarkable, or unremarkable, rather, is very intriguing to me. It reminds me of a podcast conversation I listened to a while ago where the two hosts, who are two women who are friends, were talking about the word loyalty and how they hate that word because there's a gendered aspect to it they felt that they don't like, and they felt like it is a word that we use to compliment people on and promote people's subjugation, where if someone is fed up with being mistreated and undermined at work or by their boss or whatever, we ask them, where's your company loyalty? The wife who stands by her shitty husband and tries to hold it together and save face for the sake of her family, we compliment her on how loyal she is. And it is this word we use to like make people think being held hostage in a bad situation is good. And I feel like thinking about other people as remarkable functions in a similar way. As I was thinking about this and getting very fixated on this word, I was like, I think remarkable is a dangerous word. It is not a word we should use to describe other people. Because obviously whenever you describe another person to that person is then beholden in a way to whatever image you have just created. But there's something about the word remarkable that is so unattainable, and it creates such a pressure that I'm like, we should not call each other remarkable. And I feel like what happens to all of us at some point, but you especially see it in these narratives about these young girls or these young women who are taken advantage of by much older men, is they have this moment like Ada has here where they realize, I thought this man was remarkable, but actually you're not. You are unremarkable. You are just some guy who has torpedoed my life, but I'm not going to let you do that anymore. And we see Jem have that same moment after she gets in the car with Owen and they drive to the motel and he's like, we're going to start our new life together. He tells them, I think they're going to move to Puerto Rico, and she has no say in anything in this. It is a future he is building and she is along for the ride. And you see her realize, this is not the life I want. This man is not remarkable. And a line that really stood out to me, and this takes place when they're in front of the house. He shows up and tells Jem to run away with him, and Jem's mom is like, you knew what you were doing, and she fights with him. Owen tells Jem, you are the only one who sees me. And to me, it feels like he is saying, you are remarkable because you are the only one who sees me. And I just remember watching that scene for the first time and being like, that is so much weight to put on a fucking child. To be like, you are the only person in the world who understands me. I cannot survive without you. That is just another way of holding her hostage. And the ending of this movie is quite ambiguous. We don't know where Jem is going to go next. We don't know what her plan is. But we do know that she understands this man she thought was remarkable is actually entirely unremarkable. Mm-hmm. And she realizes, I have to believe she realizes that she doesn't want to be remarkable necessarily in his eyes either, or the eyes of any other man. She just wants to be whoever the fuck she is.
I love that squiggliness of that. And I also really like that interpretation of that moment because it was different than mine, but almost a different side of the same coin, as they say. So when he looks at her and says, you're the only one that sees me, I didn't even think about the responsibility that places on her. Because I took that as him saying, and I think that both of these things are true. He's also saying in that moment, you are the only one that sees me as remarkable. Like, he wants to keep her around because he feels special.
Right. Yeah.
She makes him feel special because she does think that he's remarkable because she's 17 years old.
Right.
And that isn't to say she doesn't have any autonomy. That isn't to say that the feelings that she has for him are not real. But when you are 17 years old, your worldview obviously is limited. Your experiences are limited. And the people that you may think are remarkable are in fact simply just older than you. And that still happens to me. Honestly, like, I'll see a woman who's, 10 years older. I'll see like someone who's 45 or 50 and think, wow, they're remarkable. But the older I get, the more I realize that they're just older. They've just had more time to figure a little more out. And that's also the tragedy of these types of situations, is because it takes and takes and takes. It takes time. It takes the time she had to figure out her life and to experience it and to learn what she actually does find remarkable about the world. I feel like I want to talk about the water.
Oh, yes.
And I couldn't think of a way to really connect it, but I know that it is connected. There's a pond or a very small lake in this town that they're in. The first time that Jem and Owen have sex, I do want to say, it is strange to say having sex. It's strange to say have sex because he has groomed her. But the word rape does not, to me, seem entirely accurate. And that isn't to say that it wasn't, but it is to say that, and Melissa Febos talks about this in her book Girlhood, that book will be an intertextuality at some point. It's remarkable. That book is remarkable, I would say. There is a gap in our language for how we can talk about the kind of relationships that happen between the Jems and the Owens in this world. That happened to me personally. I don't have the language for it. It does not exist. We need to create it by having these conversations.
Right.
And so I'm going to say to have sex while understanding it diminishes the nuance that is there, but that does not yet exist in English anyway. So they have sex, and afterwards she runs into the water and just gets herself wet. And then they're at this little picnic later, and Ben is there, who again, it's Owen's little brother who wants to court her. And she just panics with the weight of her dad being sick and Owen not wanting to, and all of these things that are happening to her. And she runs into the water. And Ben chases after her, and Owen chases after her. And in both instances, she's like, leave me alone. I think she actually punches Ben, though. She hits him and he tells on her.
She was gonna kill him.
Oh, yeah. She holds him under the water.
Yes, because the second time she runs into the water, it's Ben who chases after her. She's worried that the secret about her and Owen is gonna get out. Her dad is sick, like Maggie said. And she keeps telling him to leave her alone. And he doesn't. He gets in the water and is trying to chase her. He's trying to help her, but he's also not listening to her. And she just grabs him by the shoulders and shoves him under the water. And I fully thought she was gonna kill him, and that was the direction. It's not funny, but it was just so shocking. She is really angry and frustrated that she is pushing herself to a scary limit, I would say.
Right. And I think that in both instances are symbolic of some kind of self-baptism, right? Some kind of return to autonomy. Maybe I have, quote unquote, sinned, but I can cleanse myself. I do not feel cleansed by the church. I do not feel strengthened by this community. She's searching for something, right? Okay. And other things happen. Her and Owen run away together. They're in the hotel. There's a pool there. She just walks into the pool. I think she does walk into the pool, but just with her feet. She doesn't go any further. She doesn't have a bathing suit, but that never stopped her before. And I was like, why doesn't she go into the water this time? It's because in this moment, she's starting to realize it's not a fucking baptism that she needs. She doesn't actually need to be cleansed of anything. And then after that, she leaves. And that's when she goes to the bar and she dances. It's her dancing freely and fully into herself and for herself that liberates her. Not this fake sort of cleansing of a made up sin, right? So she realizes she no longer needs a baptism. What she needs is liberation, and she finds it in her own body, in a bar that her father told her about.
Yeah.
And I just think that is beautiful and profound.
I think that analysis is beautiful and profound, and I agree with it wholeheartedly. Also, your comment about how saying they had sex doesn't feel right, but also saying it was rape doesn't feel right, and there's this language that we don't have yet to describe the nuance that is happening. I feel like the way that sex scene is filmed before she goes into the lake is attempting to capture that language that we don't have yet. The visual language of it feels like it is trying to say what we do not have the words for yet, because it's very dark. The lighting in the movie is just very naturalistic throughout, so it's very dark. We can hardly see anything. What happens is earlier in the day, Jem was at dance practice. Owen drops off a box of their new costumes, and when he hands Jem the box, he also hands her a note. And the note says to meet him at this place at this time. And I, being an adult, know what this note means. I was like, okay, they're gonna have sex. He's going to have sex with her. And I was like, I don't know if Jem knows that's what this note means. Maybe she does, maybe she doesn't. But I just had this sense of doubt where I was like, does she know what this note means? Because she meets him at the spot. They're in his car. There's no build up to anything. There's no attempting to romance her. There's no foreplay. It is so fast. They're just like in it. They don't even get fully undressed. It's just penetrative intercourse immediately. And it's very dark. It's very unromantic. The camera work is very, I don't know if frenetic is the right word, because it's kind of just stationary, but there's a tension in the air. Often, if you're watching a movie and there's two romantic leads and you're waiting for them to fuck, when they finally fuck, it releases tension. But here, it's like them finally having sex is building a different kind of, it's like a dread tension. And it's one of the least romantic sex scenes I have ever seen in my life. Even though we know that Jem is having sex with this man who she has fallen in love with. And so I just think the way that it is staged, the way that it gets led up to with him giving her that note, and just the lack of communication that occurs between them, it feels like all of that visual narrative, etc., is able to maybe say what we don't yet have the verbal words for.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. I think drawing attention to the tension of that scene.
Mm-hmm. Because he doesn't use protection.
Right.
We never, when there are other sex scenes, we never see anything using, there's no conversation about using protection. I was like, how much does she even know about her own body? Mm-hmm. How much does she know about arousal? Like, there are scenes that show her masturbating earlier and then stopping herself. So she obviously has a great deal of shame related to her sexuality. So she just, with no warning, just started having sex with this man, and then it was over immediately, and she has no time to process what has happened. She has not experienced pleasure. So if she hasn't experienced physical pleasure, then all she's hypothetically could be left with is the emotional experience or the emotional gratification of it. But I don't think she's emotionally gratified by what just happened, because she runs into the water and starts crying and is upset.
Well, I think what also was complicated if I'm remembering it correctly now, I always start to doubt myself, but she doesn't experience pleasure from him or from the act of sex, but I think you could say that arousal is a kind of pleasure.
That is true.
And she's definitely turned on in this moment, and she is wanting to engage in this act. Whether or not it is entirely consensual, of course, is the question on the line here. I think it's clear. I think we can all agree, no, it's not. But I am also very hesitant to take away her autonomy entirely and say she wasn't aroused. She didn't want to do this, because she did. She's a 17-year-old girl attracted to this older man. Her feelings are normal and, dare I say, like, healthy. They're normal sexual feelings.
Right.
And so they have sex. He comes. And obviously she has not. No. She hasn't, actually. That's the end of my sentence. She hasn't. And she goes to kiss him again. Right? I think she goes to try and make out with him again, and he kind of pushes her away.
Yeah.
And then she runs into the water.
You're right. So it's that sort of...
So it's like
rejection that sets her over the edge. You're right. I forgot about that.
So it's not just the shame of having engaged in this act, period.
Right.
She did not receive pleasure. She showed physically that she was interested in wanting to receive pleasure. And then he rejects her. He laughs at her, actually, I believe, in that moment. He's like, oh, slow down, or makes a kind of comment.
He makes a joke about her wanting to do it again. And it's like, no, actually, she's just trying to seek some kind of emotional connection with you.
And a sexual one.
Right.
I think she's responding practically in this moment to sexual arousal, which is to say, wait, I want to come too. I just wanted to add to that, to what you said about how it's doing a great job at trying to address what our language does not have to offer.
The scene allows Jem all of the space for all of the feelings that she is having, and does not try to delegitimize any of those feelings that she is having. But at the same time, the scene is explicitly not romanticizing the situation that is happening.
Right. Really good.
Yeah, it's really good.
I think that's all I got.
Well, I do have to ask you what this movie makes you want to tell your younger self.
It's just so much. I think I want to go all the way back to the beginning of my sort of self-awareness, and to the beginning of this podcast episode, where during my first communion, I realized my bra was going to show. And I want to be clear, my mother didn't shame me in that moment, but wherever I had the recognition, whether it just be via osmosis from being in that environment, which is likely the case, and it was certainly part of it, I just understood that my bra shouldn't be showing, especially as a third grader, which is strange, because especially as a third grader, who is sexualizing you? It's not my problem. It wasn't my problem as a third grader. But that, I don't know, this seems obvious. I think that I would just tell her that whatever shame you have carried, not only is it not yours, like, fucking give it away, but it wasn't all your mom's fault either. In fact, most of it wasn't. She grew up in the same world. And she was just doing the best that she could, and she was trying to keep me safe. And again, she didn't shame me in that moment, but there are other ways in which she made me feel embarrassed for having a body. But mothers see the danger of their daughters having bodies. And so the blame is always a little beyond from where we want to point the finger.
That's really good. That's really compassionate. I like to think that this segment always is about cultivating compassion, but that was particularly compassionate. So thank you. God, I don't know, man. Now I'm just thinking about bras and how I never wear one, and that freaked my mom the fuck out when I stopped wearing a bra. I have a very, very flat chest. The only time I ever wear a bra is if I'm wearing a white shirt where you'd be able to see my nipples through it. Pretty much. But when I was a girl and other people's boobs were growing and I felt really left out, so I wanted a bra. I got my first bra in 5th grade. And I remember asking my mom for it. It wasn't the, oh, we need to take you bra shopping. It was, I want a bra. Can we get a bra? And I wanted to be able to wear the one that would make my chest look the biggest. I guess I'm stumbling onto something here. And then I eventually, like high school, college, realized I don't like wearing a bra. I don't need to wear one. I understand that people who have very large breasts need to wear one so their back doesn't suffer. You know, I'm not saying that bras are part of the oppressive regime and we should all abandon them. It's complicated. Clothing is political, whatever. So I would tell my younger self, God, does this even relate to the movie?
Of course it relates.
Yeah. I would tell my younger self that her body, her choice extends to a fucking bra and that it's no one's goddamn business.
Good. I love that.
I would also tell her that a piece of clothing does not relate to a person's morality. Because the thing I remember always being warned about was wearing something where your bra strap would show. And it was like, it's only slutty girls who let their bra strap show. If you need to wear a bra, you wear a bra. And if you can happen to see the strap of that bra, that should not mean anything. It just means that that person is wearing a bra because it's a necessary garment for that person.
Right.
This is so disorganized.
No, I love it.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. We would love it if you subscribe to the show on your podcast listening platform of choice and turned on post notifications. That way you won't miss a new episode.
Check this episode's show notes for additional information on the secondary texts we referenced. You can follow the podcast on Instagram at Tell Me I'm Sorry, and email us your own musings and questions at tellmeimsorry@gmail.com.
You can follow me on Letterboxd at Marin Harrington if you want to see what other movies I'm watching.
And you can follow me on Instagram at _saint_Margaret.
I'm Marin.
And I'm Maggie.
And you've been listening to Tell Me I'm Sorry. And you thought the episode was over, but it's not, because we believe in epilogues on this podcast. And this week I get to tell Maggie what movie we're watching next. It stars the very funny, very talented Regina Hall. And it's from 2018, I think. I don't know why I'm building up so much suspense.
I like it. I like this the suspense because I never know people's like actors' names or anything. So I'm like, who is this?
She's great. She's great. She's great in this movie, which is called Support the Girls. Speaking of bras and breasts.
I've never seen this.
Okay. I really like it. I've seen it twice. I haven't had a chance to rewatch it yet for this podcast, but both times I watched it, I really liked it. Cool. And I'm excited to talk about it.
And it's a great pun.
I know. It's called Support the Girls. It is currently streaming on both Hulu and Canopy if you would like to watch along, or you can probably get the DVD from your local library.
Nice.
So,
all right.
Support the girls in your life always as well.
Listening to this podcast.
And by support us girls. Okay. Bye.
That's perfect.